This is St. Anthony Padre Retrograd, and I want to look today at the preaching of St. Paul in Athens at the Areopagus. This has come up several times with me, and once on Sede Picante's channel when I was with him on there, and then also on Twitter. I've engaged with several using this passage to show that the Novus Ordo's false ecumenism, where they go and pray with the heretics and they go to their houses of worship and hear their sermons and engage in dialogue, in this ecumenical dialogue, and receive blessings from them, and this indifferentism that is being done. They'll just say, hey, check out Acts 17. Acts 17 is what Francis is doing. Francis and St. Paul are doing the same thing from Acts 17. And I didn't realize this was a thing, that people actually use this. And I was at first taken aback, so shocked that someone would say that what St. Paul was doing with the Athenian idolaters in Acts 17, what we see Francis doing is copying that Francis is actually behaving as St. Paul. It's so shockingly ridiculous that I was taken aback. I couldn't believe it, and I actually found it kind of insulting, but what I want to do is just kind of look at this passage. I noticed that the website Novus Ordo Watch put up an article recently about it. So if you're interested, also you can go to Novus Ordo Watch. I'll probably link it in the description, where he goes over Acts 17. And excuse me, what's good about that article is he goes over several different commentaries on this particular text. One of the most interesting, and one of my favorite commentators is Cornelius a Lapide. Now, but the problem with Cornelius a Lapide, or with the commentary of Cornelius a Lapide, is that it's not all translated into English. The section, the book of Acts, Cornelius a Lapide's commentary, which basically summarizes the fathers on a particular passage of scripture. He goes over all the different fathers and doctors and how they interpreted it, and then he kind of gives what he thinks is the definitive understanding. It's an excellent commentary, but not all of it's been translated in English. What's good about that article that Novus Ordo Watch put up is that he was, I guess, able to get someone to translate the particular section of the commentary of Acts 17 from Cornelius a Lapide. So you get to read this. It's unique because it says not in English. So maybe it's translated in other languages, I don't know, or unless you read Latin, it's kind of lost to us English readers. But it's an excellent commentary, Cornelius a Lapide. He has other commentaries from some other people. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I know he has the Haydock on there, and that's usually, that's just my default. That and Cornelius Lapide, if I can read his stuff, if it's been translated. So basically, what I'm going to just articulate here is similar to. It's basically what you'll see in the Haydock, except for I might go in a little bit more detail. And I'm not going to be really, doing anything really extreme, but just pointing out the obvious. Okay. So if you're not familiar with this particular section of this story, St. Paul he's recently was preaching the gospel in Thessalonica, and the Jews there were persecuting him. And so the Catholic brothers there had him to head out, and they put him on a ship, and he sailed, and he ended up landing in Athens. Okay, so there, while he's in Athens, he engages with some of the philosophers and so forth and whatnot, and eventually begins to preach to them about Christ and so forth. Anyway, we'll look at this text right here. It's in Acts 17 and verses 14. It says right here. It says, and then immediately the brethren sent away Paul to go unto the sea, but Silas and Timothy remained there. And it says in verse 15 of Acts 17 that they brought him as far as Athens. All right, and receiving a commandment from him to Silas and Timothy that they should come to him. So he's going to be waiting for, they sent him up to Athens, and he sent word to Timothy and Silas to come meet him there. So now he's just kind of kicking it in Athens. He's separated because they said the Jews were coming and persecuting him, coming to seek his life. And they just sent Paul out, and he ended up getting Athens, and he sent word to say, hey, meet me here. So he's just waiting for them to come back. Say, hey, I'm here in Athens. This is where I'm at. Come meet me to Saint Timothy and Saint Silas. Now in verse 16 it says, now whilst Paul waited for them at Athens, his spirit was stirred within him, seeing the city wholly given, wholly given to idolatry. No, of course he sees the idols, and his spirit was stirred within him. He was bothered. Okay, I think we can properly understand that his spirit was stirred within him, that he was bothered by all the idolatry. He was moved to speak. Now, maybe the modernist spin would be like, wow, he saw all the beautiful idols and all the representations of the one true God in all this idolatry, and his spirit was moved. Maybe that might be a modernist take. I don't know. But I think an obvious take is that he was bothered by the idolatry. He wanted to share and to get them out of their blindness. Okay, so in verse 17, it says, he disputed, therefore, in the synagogue with the Jews, okay, and with them that served God. I would think those would be like the Gentile converts to Judaism. And in the marketplace, every day with them that were there. So he disputed, therefore, he debated with them. He engaged with them and debate, and you'll see what it is that he debated with them. They'll say, he didn't just see, well, tell me a little bit about your beliefs. And here's mine. And I don't want to say mine's better. Obviously mine is not better than yours. That's what, I think we should all just, see what it is we agree upon, and just be happy and live harmoniously together. Obviously that's not what he's disputing. That's not the dispute going on. Right? Because everywhere Paul went, he would dispute with the people, and then they would try to kill him. So first place, of course, that he would go to is he'd find the synagogues, because he wanted to convert the Jews to the true religion, right? And to the God-fearers, which are the Jewish, let's say the Gentile converts to Judaism. And then it said in the marketplace, so that would be where the pagans are. And so everywhere he's going and disputing and engaging them, right? And debating them on the merits of their faith and teaching them the truth. And in verse 18, it says, and certain philosophers of the Epicureans and of the Stoics disputed with him. Okay, so now they're engaging in debate. And some said, what is it that this word sower would say? But others were saying, he seemeth to be a setter forth of new gods, because he preached to them Jesus and the resurrection. So it's interesting. He's disputing with the Jews. He's disputing with the God-fearers. He's disputing with the people in the market. And what is he preaching? Is he preaching that all the paths, all our religions here together lead to God? That all these religions here are just one language. We all have different languages, and we all, or whatever Pope Francis was saying. Did he go about and say how, hey, it's all good? You have this beautiful idolatry going on, and we have our mass that we do on our altar, and it's, you have your way, I have our way, but we just speak in different languages. No. It says clearly here that they were curious because he was preaching about Jesus Christ and the resurrection. So he was telling them about Jesus Christ, disputing with them against their gods. So they were like, what is this guy? What's this guy trying to tell us about? He's trying to teach us some new God, or he's trying to teach us, so that's what they're saying. They're like, he seems setting forth something new here. And in verse 19, it says, and taking him, they brought him to the Areopagus, saying, we want to know more about this new doctrine, that you speak of, right? It says, for thou bringest in certain new things to our ears, and we would know, therefore, what these things mean. So they basically, some of the leaders in the marketplace said, hey, come to the Areopagus later, and so we can hear more about this Jesus and the resurrection you're talking about. We find this a little bit interesting. And Luke, in this parentheses, says that the Athenians and the strangers that were there, they employed themselves in nothing else but either in telling or hearing something new. So they found this interesting. So they thought, okay, this is some new doctrine. We'd like to hear about it. We got nothing else to do. So Paul, come talk about it. So in verse 22, it says, but Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, ye men of Athens. So Paul's not going to wait. So it says, now, but you men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are too superstitious. It says, for passing by and seeing your idols, I found an altar also on which was written, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship without knowing it, that I preach to you. God, who made the world and all things therein, he being Lord of heaven and earth, dwelleth not in temples made with hands, neither is he served with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing that he who giveth to all life and breath and all things, and he made of one all mankind to dwell upon the whole face of the earth, determining appointed times and limits in their habitation, that they should seek God, if happily they may feel after him and find him, although he be not far from every one of us. For in him we live and move and are, as some also of your own poets said, for we are also his offspring. Now, being therefore the offspring of God, we must not suppose the divinity to be like gold, silver, stone, graven art, and device of men. And God indeed, having winked at the times of this ignorance, now declareth unto men that all should everywhere do penance, because he hath appointed a day wherein he will judge the world in equity by the man whom he hath appointed, giving faith to all by raising him up from the dead. Now, that's what he preached to them. And then it caused a little bit of an uproar. It says that when they heard the resurrection, some indeed mocked, and others said, we will hear thee again concerning this matter. And then Paul went out from them. And it says, but certain men adhering to him but did believe, among whom was also Decianus the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris. Okay, so forth. So we see what Paul preached. Okay. He taught them about the one true God. He told them that the true God is not made of stones and rocks, that all mankind descended from the first man, that he appointed all men their generations or their areas, and that he now commands all men to do penance, to turn from their idols, okay, because he's going to appoint a day where he will judge the world through this one man, the Messiah. All right? By proving it by raising him from the dead, whom he had said was Jesus Christ earlier, telling about Jesus and the resurrection. So listen to what he said here. There's no ecumenism. He said, look, there's one God who is going to judge the world by a man, Jesus Christ, judge the living and the dead. And all men are to turn from their idols and do penance and follow this one man who's going to judge living and dead. That's what he preached. Okay, so one of the things that people bring up is that it says, Paul's standing in the midst of the Areopagus, and he says, men in Athens, you perceive you are too superstitious. Now, it's possible that this passage, this phrase, too superstitious, could be like too religious, or it's the way the Douay-Rheims translated as too superstitious. I perceive in all things that you all are way too superstitious. It does have a negative tone, and it could have a neutral tone or a negative tone. This is what I've heard. But clearly the translators of the Douay-Rheims thought that what Paul was saying was to point out sort of a negative tone. Like, hey, what you guys are doing is ridiculous. You have all these idols here. But then you also have this one, which is interesting. Okay? So he says, I perceive you guys are just all over the map. You guys got all these like all this idolatry. You worship all kind of ridiculous gods. But then I notice that you have a altar here, And the altar here is interesting because it says to the unknown God. And that prompts St. Paul to say, hey, look, let me tell you about the God you're trying to worship there, or the God that you worship through the altar of the unknown God that you worship without knowing, he says. He goes, what therefore you worship without knowing it, I'm going to tell you about. So here, at this particular point, this is where the modernists will say, see, they were worshiping God through their through their idolatry. That's what St. Paul says. He says, look, I want to tell you about the God who you are worshiping, who you were trying to get with and get close with through your idols. But that's not what Paul says. Okay, this is exactly how they did what they said to me in my engagement with them. And I said, that's not what St. Paul says at all. Paul doesn't even address the idol worship. What he actually addresses and what he uses is the altar to the unknown God. He points at the altar of the unknown God and says, hey, look, because maybe there were those there that were clearly worshiping this unknown God on this altar, albeit ignorantly and certainly wrongly, but yet, they're attempting to worship this unknown God, this unknown one God, whoever that could be. So when Paul says, look, I see that you guys are way too superstitious. You got all these, and you're all over the map in your religions, but you have something here interesting that I want to point out to you. And those who worship at this thing, those who worship at this altar of the unknown God, I want to proclaim that God you're worshiping there. He didn't point to the Buddhism or the Hindus or whatever the pagan idols and say, hey, you see that idol there? That idol, the true God you're worshiping through that idol. Let me proclaim it to you. No, he didn't even address the idols. He found this particular altar to the unknown God, and it was used to point. He was using that as an example to point to the true God. Though he was addressing specifically those people who were using that altar to worship the unknown God. So there was those that were seeking God, it apparently seems like, or maybe they had heard about the one God, but just didn't know enough about it, so they set up an altar to him as well. That way we don't want to forget this God. So they had all the different gods there. They didn't want to leave him out. Okay, so there are some that would maybe go to the altar of the unknown God and worship there. And the point of the matter is that he's not addressing all pagan idolatry and so forth. They're saying that all these pagans that are worshiping in their idolatry are on a path to God. No, he's just pointing out simply that and using this altar to the unknown God as a way to reach these people about the true God, and saying, and it would seem that it's possible, or at least that if they're going to worship, if let's say the people that were at this altar of the unknown God had a concept of a one true God, and they would worship God at that altar. Well, they would be worshiping God, but wrongly, falsely, as St. Paul would say. What therefore you worship, what therefore you worship the true one, the one true God that you're at least proclaiming or trying to. I'm gonna, he says without even knowing you're doing it, but. I'm going to preach that one to you. But he wasn't pointing to the pagans. He wasn't saying, oh, look at the you guys who worship through Buddha or whatever the idol worship there. I'm just giving an example. You're worshiping God ignorantly through that Buddhism. No. So this is not, there's absolutely nothing here that is reminiscent to what we see in the Novus Ordo false ecumenism taking place. And there's nothing here that St. Paul is saying that is through these pagan idols that they are able to, that there is a path to God, that they're actually worshiping the true God, although wrongly in their paganism. No, because he doesn't address all the pagans. He addresses the altar to the unknown God. It wasn't an idol. It was just an altar to the unknown God. It was just what I'm envisioning would be something like a simple altar there that was engraved, it said to the unknown God, and there was nothing else there, just a simple altar. So, and then he preaches them what the true God is. Now, as I said, what he preached to them was about the one God who created the world, created man, and that all generation of men came from the one man that he created. He separated their divisions, and he is now commanding everybody to turn from their idolatry, to worship and to do penance, to worship the one true God who was raised from the dead, and he's going to judge the living and the dead. Who is Jesus Christ, which he preached, because they asked about Jesus Christ and his resurrection. That's what he did. He used something in their culture. He used this. He used this not in the culture, but he used this altar to bring the truth, but to twist it and to say that what Paul is trying to say is that look, you pagans, you're all trying to seek the one true God, which he didn't say that either. Only those who were worshiping at the altar of the unknown God were really, in any sense, seeking the one God, because that's the only ones he addresses and remotely connects to the true God, was the altar to the unknown God. Okay, well, the unknown God is the one true God. I'll tell you about that. He didn't say, oh, that idol is the one true God. No. So he wasn't addressing all the pagans, but simply the altar to the unknown God. And then he proclaims these things. So what else does he say? Let's see. He says that we're all his offspring. Okay. Maybe this, what he says, let me go a little before that. He said in this sermon that they should seek God if happily they may feel after him and find him, although he be not far from every one of them. Right? For in him we live, move, and have our being. So he's saying that all men should be seeking God, that God had put it in their hearts to seek after him and to search for him. Okay. He's not saying that they're doing that in their pagan idols. There's no equating there. He's just simply giving a sermon. Is that where he says, he has made, like he says, this God is not served by men's hands. He doesn't dwell in temples made with hands, as though he need anything, seeing that he giveth to life all breath, all. And he hath made of one man all mankind to dwell on the face of the earth, determining their appointed times and limits, that they should seek God, and happily they may feel after him. So he created all mankind to worship him, to serve him, to follow him. Okay? Because it says, for in him we live, move, and are, because in him we have our life, our breath. So he requires, he is due worship. And he says, for in him we live, move, and are, as some also of your poets have said, for we are also his offspring. In other words, we're all created by God. So we all belong to him. And it says, therefore, being the offspring of God, we must not suppose the divinity to be like unto gold, silver, stone, so forth. So he's correcting their error. He's not saying they're worshiping God through their error. He's just correcting their error. He's pointing out that that's not what God's like. He didn't say you're actually worshiping the true God, but that is not what God is about. Okay. Anyway, so I'm just pointing out to see what seems to be very much the obvious. Okay. And can anyone really, with a straight face, say that what Pope Francis and any of these Novus Ordo bishops, when they are doing, that they're actually going to the false religions and telling them about Jesus Christ, and that they all must turn from their idolatry, follow the one true God who's going to judge the living and the dead? Are they doing that? That's what Paul did at the Areopagus. He wasn't doing false ecumenism at the Areopagus. So to use Acts 17 is simply a lie. Okay, it's an insult to the Holy Saint Paul to say that he is participating in false ecumenism. It's a lie. Either the people that are telling you that, if this is coming from the hierarchy or whoever, anybody's telling you that, they're telling you a lie. All one has to do is simply read the text and see that what Paul did was preach the gospel to these people. It's as simple as that. I mean, he preached the gospel. He rebuked their paganism. He's, called it. I perceive you guys are way too superstitious because look at all these idols you have here. You have nothing consistent. I mean, what is going on? But you got something interesting here. The altar to the unknown God. Let me proclaim that one God you worship through. You try to worship this God through this altar. Yeah, let me proclaim the one true God to you. Yeah, that doesn't sound very ecumenical. Yeah. So I just felt the need to just go over this. I thought it'd be interesting. Acts 17, basically 14 through the whole chapter. So if somebody brings this up again, you can point out that, hey, look, that's not what's going on. There is no false ecumenism here. Go ahead and read the article, the whole article by Novus Ordo Watch on Acts 17 as well. It's very interesting. It goes over a little bit of the commentary. So it has takes a different angle in this in what I'm doing right now. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Looking over Acts 17. Maybe we can pray to St. Paul to tear down this false ecumenism and people using him as an example, as someone who's participating in this fake dialogue. Ave Maria.